What's going on, y'all? It's Rick and Jones, and we are diving into the digital future every week. I'm Jones. I've been in the tech space for about 5 years now. Worked on a tech startup in the music space first, now working on another one in the creative space. And I've been in the NFT space and Web3 for about 2 years now. I think that digital property rights are incredibly important, and decentralization will be an essential component to the open metaverse. So I'm excited to share thoughts weekly on all things Web3.
What's up, guys? I am Rick. I'm an XR developer and currently a graduate student studying computer science so that I can really sink my teeth into the industry going forward. I'll be bringing forth some VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality. I can define all that stuff as we go. I don't have any background in Web3, so I'll be asking Jones questions about that.
Yeah, no, I literally know nothing about VR and AR, so that's why Rick's here to enlighten me. So, Rick, what do you got going on in the AR space this week? Anything exciting?
So, biggest news in the VR industry, VR, XR, AR, mixed reality.
And what is extended reality? Just real quick.
Extended reality is like the umbrella term for virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And so, just quick definitions for each of those. Virtual reality replaces the entire real world. That's what we're doing right now. Augmented reality is just overlaying information on the actual real world. So, like a face filter on Snapchat is augmented reality. And then mixed reality.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen Microsoft's HoloLens, but there's physical data in the real world and you can interact with it. Reach out and grab like a virtual cube that's sitting on the desk in front of you.
Mixed reality, you can interact with something in showcase through your
Yeah,
lens
you
or
can like
whatever.
put.
AR is just you can't. There's not really any interaction.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best
Okay.
definition of it that exists. Biggest extended XR. So there's this Apple analyst, Ming-Chi Kuo, I think I'm saying the name, who pretty much is like notorious for being like the Apple leaker. He knows all the goings on in Apple. He knows all the suppliers. He gets all that information and he leaks everything. So the most recent
Yeah.
one is, unfortunately, another delay of Apple's headset, but there's some interesting details with that. So he is reporting that the market previously expected Apple's mixed reality headset to ship, to be announced in Q1 2023, and then ship probably by Q2 2023. That's now pushed back to the second half of 2023. However, this time it's for software reasons. The last 5 or so delays have all been hardware overheating, display issues, supply issues. The fact that we're so close to the original announcement and launch date, I'm taking that to mean that the hardware is finally just set and ready to go. And according to the analyst, it is planning to go start producing early 2023. They've just downgraded how many headsets they'll ship. Another reason that's important is
Gotcha.
it's a software delay. This news comes at the same time as they're changing the name of their operating system for the headset from Reality OS to XR OS, Extended Reality OS. I think there's some awareness on their part of how badly the public is receiving the whole concept of VR, AR, and metaverse because Meta has done a pretty atrocious job marketing the term. So I think
Ooh.
totally speculative, but I think they're seeing that the software offerings that Meta has had have been just so poor and so poorly received that they're really taking the time to make sure that this launches with a killer operating system, killer apps, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the story and my completely speculative take on why they're delaying over software issues. The analyst didn't really give any more info than that.
Very cool news. So I actually have a few questions on this because I think it's pretty interesting and I don't know much about it. So first off, this headset is mixed reality. Is it the first mixed reality headset for consumers? Because the Quest is not, correct? Or
So Quest technically can do mixed reality, like the one we're wearing right now, the Quest 2. It's got that like black and white mixed reality and you can develop apps on that. They're just so bad that no one would ever really use them because it's, if you've used it, it's black and white, it's grainy, it's distorted, so no one would use that. And so that's, the Quest Pro is full color now in higher resolution, so you can do mixed reality there. Although I've also heard that's distorted and piss poor experience.
For the Apple one, is that VR also, or like the primary use case is mixed reality?
So this same analyst has leaked their strategy behind the headset, and VR is not their focus at all. This headset will have VR,
Okay.
but they're leaning into the mixed reality and AR things because this headset essentially is going to be like a development kit that onboards a ton of developers into the augmented reality systems they've already built. And then down the road, their real, like,
Okay.
holy grail game changer is the glasses, which will just be like augmented reality, lightweight, and have a bunch of really cool functionality that we don't know yet. They're only going to ship like 500,000 units next year, according to the leaker. So it's not going to be a household item. It's going to be really expensive. And so they're
Gotcha.
expected to announce that they're working towards glasses. And this is more of a dev kit for early adopters to start getting in their ecosystem.
Okay, cool. Okay, I have another question, Rick, that I'm very intrigued about. Every headset, do they all operate on their own like island software, if that makes sense? The Quest has its own Quest software.
Yeah, maybe if I can ask back, are you thinking of it in the same way that like Apple has Mac OS and Microsoft has Windows,
That's
like a
exact
full
yeah,
operating system that
exactly. And I'm thinking about it, I guess, from the Web3 decentralized perspective of the open metaverse. How does that really work? If the headset that you use, almost like Xbox and PlayStation in the early days, where you could only do PlayStation games or you could only do Xbox games, is that what these headsets are going towards too?
So yeah, Apple is just such a closed environment company. Like you and the Web3 lads are screwed with Apple because Apple's gonna have
Yeah.
their own operating system. I think it's gonna operate like an iPhone where you can't install apps anywhere besides their app store unless you like jailbreak it, which is a whole other thing that most people won't
Yeah.
want to do. But like they want you to go through them and pretty much so they can charge insane fees on you. 30%, which is like pretty unheard of. Now it's becoming more standard because Apple has this like insane fee structure, but they're definitely not gonna allow this thing to be that open, I would guess. And Meta's done the same. There is side quest where if you have a PC, you can load any app onto your Quest, but it's like a workaround and not officially built into the operating system.
So is VR chat, is that a Quest app? Could I use that on my Apple device?
I would bet VR chat is going to be one of the apps too. They'll build a version of the app for the Apple headset. Is my
Gotcha.
guess.
Yeah, it's all just so fascinating because from the Web3 perspective, it's all about like blockchain and decentralization. But in order to get into this digital world, you need some piece of like hardware. And so if the hardware on ramp is always centralized, then will you ever be able to achieve that kind of open, decentralized vision? How do
Honestly,
you?
that's one of the things that makes me doubt some of the Web3 stuff the most. I'm not a Web3 hater by any means, but I have doubts about how it'll be implemented because these companies have very little incentive to decentralize and give away some of the power they have over controlling app stores that generate them an insane amount of fees. So like it's doable and maybe some of these
Yeah,
companies will look into it and think a rising tide lifts all ships. We should let it happen, but especially Apple's already banning blockchain. So like I feel like Apple's not going
yeah,
to be the
well,
one.
exactly. So that was low key one of the pieces of news I had. So Coinbase is one of the biggest exchanges, obviously. It's like one of the biggest on ramps. You can exchange your US dollars to get Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever. But they also have a wallet, and Apple just basically disallowed the latest update because the update allowed for transferring NFTs through the app. And obviously, Apple's App Store has a 30% fee, like you said, on like any transaction. So they basically said, they told Coinbase, the only way this can go through is if you give us 30% of the gas fees for transactions that happen when you transfer NFTs. And so for those who are unaware about like how blockchain works, like it's all programmed in, right? So like gas fees, you can't, it's impossible. Like it's just like you can't take 30% of that programmed in gas fee to give to Apple. And so it's just wild to your point about this kind of tension between like a centralized actor like Apple and their incentives, which is just to make money, versus this whole decentralized ecosystem. And the debate right now is like, did Apple know about this? And like, just was it like a shot across the bow kind of thing where we do not support this at all? Or was it something just like an error that they didn't understand that you can't do that? And from my perspective, it's like Apple's got to know. It's like the most basic thing of all
Yeah.
time. Though you can't
There's
it's the blockchain's proof.
It's
Like
like
it
the
feels like it
biggest
was
company in the
intended.
world. Like they've had a research team dive into crypto. It's been like a decade now of everyone being aware of maybe not understanding crypto, but like knowing its existence. Apple has hundo p dug into it a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was hearing some on Twitter, like, oh, maybe they didn't know, but it's no. I feel like that's got to be an intentional thing. And so I don't know how that transpires. I feel like attention will just continue to grow as we move forward. But there also has been other companies adopting the technology. I don't know if you saw Meta, Reddit. Like a lot of people are now introducing digital collectibles, introducing blockchain tech into their platforms, which is pretty cool. It's leading to some adoption. And I think a cool thing too is they're not using the term NFTs because, like you said about how VR has such negative press, NFT is also the default to that is like scam, like what's going on there. So they've been using digital collectibles and stuff, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, it's just the tension between centralized and decentralized, I think is going to continue to
Is the
grow. And like,
general
I don't
vibe
know.
among the Web3 crypto bro squad that companies like Apple would just need to be replaced in the long term? Like I've gotten the vibe that it's generally like this is so game changing, it's going to completely shake up the tech landscape. Does that mean you need to blow out like the Apples and Metas and replace them with companies who from the core.
I feel like people are like very much on the spectrum here. But like the reason why I think the Instagram thing's interesting is because that's Meta, right? And they're adopting this. And I listened to a podcast about the people behind this implementation in Instagram, and they were very Web3 ethos. The way it works is that Meta is actually paying for the gas fees. It's through Polygon, which is like a side chain of Ethereum. And so if you mint one of these digital collectibles on Instagram, it works the same way, where now you have this tied to your address. You can use it on any Ethereum app or whatever. So that was cool because it was like, okay, that's actually adopting the ethos. They're bringing the blockchain rails into their centralized platform to allow that to coexist. So I just don't know. But it does seem like Apple in particular seems like that's one of the biggest points of
Yeah,
tension
they've just
as we
always
go.
been so hostile to this kind of stuff. The one positive thing is Apple's market share globally isn't that big. It's just in the US where it's like motheringly large to the point where they really have a massive impact. They're definitely big globally, but Android is, I'm pulling this out of my ass, but like 70% of the global market share and like Apple is like
Yeah.
20%. It's something
No
surprising
way.
like that because living in America, you're like, everyone I know has an iPhone. I know people with Android and laptops that are Windows based, but it's not as common.
Thing about Android and
Yeah,
their
it's
kind of
Google's operating system. It's more open by a long shot. That's why when everyone talks about why their Android phone is superior to your Mac or to your iOS phone, it's got all these features because you don't have to go through the Android App Store. Google has an App Store that you can use, but you don't have to go through it. You can download from other places. You can customize everything a lot more. That's the big selling point for
interesting.
everyone. So they're definitely more open. I don't know what the logic is for them allowing things to be more open. Maybe it's like a legacy thing and they just went with the computer model. Even Apple,
Yeah.
at least with their laptops for now, allow you to download from websites, from because it's just historically what you've done. And if let's say tomorrow Apple was like, you know what, no, also on our computers, you have to use the App Store. You can't download, you can't go get Ableton from their website. You have to get it through us. I think a lot of people would be like, okay, I'm not using a Mac anymore if I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, actually, that reminds me. I think they did talk about the origins of Android in that Metaverse book because I actually finished that. Is that by Matthew Ball?
Yeah,
For anyone listening, would highly recommend. What's it called? Just Metaverse by Matthew Ball. Because I
definitely
think
big
yeah, I'm pretty sure they
recommendation.
did dive into all that. It
Yeah,
was
I
super
feel
cool.
like
On
that
that
book
note,
red pilled me
for
on
good.
Apple's shitty clothes
Same.
practices.
Same.
I've always been not an
100%.
Apple fanboy, but I've just gotten Apple products and just because I'm used to it. And then I read that and I was like, damn, this is brutal what they do.
Dude, 100%. Because I heard about it and stuff, obviously, and like I'm into Web3, so like they talk about that kind of stuff, but I never really conceptualized it to the point of what was said in that book and just the simple picture of where we live right now in the US, right? Like the freedoms we have to own property and that's ours and have true ownership rights. And then if you think about how it exists right now in the digital world. Imagine the parallel of Apple back to the physical world. Like you would think of some kind of oppressive, almost like 1984 vibes, where it's like you're operating in their system. You do anything you buy, which I mean is like taxes right now. But that painted a very stark picture to me of if we do end up going more and more into a digital space, I think at the bare minimum, we would want to experience similar freedoms that we have in the physical world, in the digital world. And right now, it seems like it's lining up where we might not be able to experience those like that because there are these huge centralized actors like Apple that can control your whole experience.
I mean, it's just the centralized component of it has just been so profitable for these companies. And most people either don't understand it or are okay with it. I'm not saying people are dumb. I didn't even understand the ramifications of how significant the closed garden ecosystem of Apple was. Just the inflationary aspect of it, the innovation killing, that it's just so expensive to launch an app. You're barely profitable. That profit just is immediately eaten up by 30% fees, which is insane.
Totally. And I think right now it's hard to recognize the gravity of it because the reality is like obviously we're on our screens all day, but we're not really genuinely interacting in a digital environment like even close to what we are in the physical world. But when there becomes real pure economic activity and stuff in primarily the digital world, that is going to become very relevant very quickly. And I feel like people aren't really realizing. I always think Fortnite's an interesting example of this where people are spending so much money in that game, right? And it's just a game, but they could take that stuff away from you at any point. They could close it down, they could do whatever, you don't own it. And I feel like people don't really care about that because it's a game. But imagine if that's your real life. Like in the same way that you're interacting in real life right now with your house, someone could just take that away. Like then that starts to become more and more of a factor. And
I mean, it's already huge just for younger generations. Just Fortnite, the whole skins thing. I feel like we grew up with gaming and we grew up with skins, but not to the extent that it's been introduced recently. And I feel like I've heard that younger kids being swagged out in Fortnite. I feel like an old man right now, but it's like being swagged out in Fortnite makes you is like the equivalent of rolling into school with Heelys, which used to be the coolest thing ever, I promise.
Oh, dude, Heelys are unbelievable. Dude, also in the Metaverse book, all the Roblox user numbers, you don't really even conceptualize it until you read this book about how digital the next generation is. Yes, they're scrolling on TikTok and stuff, but even beyond that, we're acting in these digital worlds, building new worlds. Like that is crazy. Another note on this was one of the other pieces of news that I think is interesting. So have you ever heard of Ledger? It's a hardware wallet.
Yeah, I actually, fun fact, I had a brief stint with crypto a while ago and got one of those wallets and have never used it.
Okay, nice. Cool.
So I'm aware of it,
cool.
but
So
I've
for
never
those-
actually used it, so I don't actually understand why I should use it.
Okay, I guess so. Just to touch on that real quick before I go into this news. So basically, if you have your money stuck in an exchange like Coinbase TX, it's almost similar to having it in a bank. And if the banks fail, similar to how the whole FTX meltdown, a lot of people lost funds in there because they'd had their funds locked up in a centralized exchange. Basically, what a hardware wallet does is it allows you to take your own custody of your coins. So you can basically send them to your hardware wallet and then you have the access code to that wallet. Your coins are essentially stored in this hardware wallet offline, which protects them from any kinds of attacks. It's totally in your custody, so it's called self-custody. So if XTX goes down, Coinbase goes down, any of that, you're fine because you have these. So that's a huge thing for anyone getting into crypto is make sure you have self-custody over your coins because if anything happens in the industry, like any exchanges blow up or whatever, you will not be okay. Most likely if your coins are stuck on these exchanges. But if you have the hardware wallet, like barring the whole blockchain imploding, and like then we have much bigger issues. Like then you have all your stuff secured. But all that is to say, so Ledger is one of the leading in the industry that makes these hardware wallets. They just announced this new thing called Stacks, where basically they took that hardware wallet and they totally reshaped the design. And wild thing here is that the guy who, I might be wrong on this, forgive me, but the guy who literally designed the iPhone or something like that was the one who designed this new product. And it literally looks almost like an iPhone. It's these little credit card type things that have touch screens where you can access all your coins. And it's really interesting because you could almost see a world, and they haven't said anything like this, where they do start competing with hardware, where it's because this is where your crypto assets are anyways. So you could think about them reimagining what that hardware looks like for the new digital
Yeah, like
on like that's rooted in a
pairing
blockchain.
online experiences with it kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess
Like
like
you can
almost
access
like
like a VR
so you know how
chat
to
in there.
maybe, or even just something as simple as like transferring NFTs, right? Like the idea with Apple in the App Store with the Coinbase wallet, where like now you can't even do that because Apple's, unless you give us 30% of your blockchain fees, you can't even do this, and that's impossible. So you could imagine almost maybe Android, if that's open system, but rebuilding some of that App Store infrastructure type stuff for more decentralized apps that exist natively in the digital world that's run on blockchain. They haven't announced anything like that. All they did was just redo this hardware, but the podcast host was extrapolating towards that, and it was interesting to think about. Huh. Yeah, maybe there could, to your point about when you asked me about like, what's the solution against Apple, maybe it is some of these native digital companies competing.
Personally, it seems like that would have to be it. I've thought about it more from the gaming perspective. Tim Sweeney is the CEO of Epic Games. He's not hostile to the idea of blockchain. He just, at the moment, has no interest in implementing it. And I think it's just tough for him to justify. It's like, why would I allow you to take this asset and sell it somewhere that isn't controlled by us where we can take a fee? And I think that's the biggest thing is if you want to get this stuff to happen, you might just need to build an experience from the ground up in a different company that then becomes the next big thing, like an Epic Games sort of thing.
It's almost like the consumers will decide. If you build both, if you start building up this infrastructure for blockchain, the idea of it is that people will care about it because you have true ownership of your assets. You can take them between games. But I guess the pessimistic side would be there is a world where it turns out no one actually really cares and they're fine with using it. And then in that case, Apple probably will continue to flourish and stuff like that. But yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it is building up both sides.
I just am not convinced. I think they might. I also think they might not. I mean, there's demonstrations of people getting really into skins and trading them. Counter-Strike is the earliest example of you can gamble on skins, you can sell them off site, people trade them. Someone sold a CS:GO skin for, or at least listed it for 400 grand, something stupid. There's a market for it. It's just, I don't know how big it is. There's also just all the technical hurdles of how do you bring something from Fortnite to like Minecraft? They look completely different. You'd have to somehow agree to a set of standards, which apparently Nvidia, the GPU making company, is working on some sort of like thing I think called Omniverse, where they're trying to set up like standards going forward that you can convert digital objects more easily between different platforms. But like, again, you still have to get all these companies to agree to use it, which is probably the biggest hurdle.
Yeah. Dude, okay, last point on this, just to get my whole thesis on why I do think that it will be just as important as it is in the physical world. Did you ever collect Pokemon cards or anything like that?
I did. I've never been a big collector of things generally.
I had a big Pokemon face, I can't lie. And I would have like all these cards and I would collect them, right? And like they would be mine. Like I'd get a pack and it was so fun seeing what was open, if you get a rare one or whatever. And I keep them in my room. I had this whole pack and whatever. And it's like, no one could take those from me except for maybe like my mom or if someone came in and like stole them or something like that. But it wasn't like Nintendo, is that who like runs Pokemon? It's not like Nintendo could snap their fingers and they would vanish from my possession. And so I think that is essentially my whole thesis that right now, the only way to do that in a digital world, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but is through blockchain. That is the only way that you can have sovereign ownership over something digital that's not centralized through a company that they could take away in any second. Not that they would. I feel like it's like a very dystopian that they actually would. I feel like that's maybe even more than a
Possible.
portion that. Yeah, okay, but
If
so
your
that
account
I
get
guess that
Counter
like
Strike, then like I think you probably lose access to all your skins.
exactly. So that I guess is my whole thesis that like I have no idea what the digital world is going to look like, how we're going to interact, anything like that. My belief though is that we will continue to progress more and more digital. And in the same example of the Pokemon cards thing, the only way to achieve that in a digital space is through blockchain. And that is so important to have that in the same way that we have in the physical world.
Yeah, I dig that description. I have doubts, but that is the kind of description that makes me think this will happen in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. In the long run, we shall see. Anything else happening in VR, AR?
Here's one very relevant to where we're sitting right now. Big VR chat update that I think potentially is a game changer. So I told you a while back, I had this startup idea about VR Discord. So basically, you can have groups
Yes.
in VR and you can go to a hangout spot with them. It's just the most genius idea, and I'm a genius. But no longer, because VR chat itself has just introduced groups to the game, which completely makes that startup idea pretty pointless because this game is perfect already for it. So groups just rolled out. I think it's out of beta now, so you can do it, but you can essentially set up like a Discord group. So VR chat has this issue for anyone who hasn't played it. You start the game, and unless you have friends who play it and tell you where to go, you go into public lobbies, and then like within 5 minutes, a 7-year-old will come up to you and call you a slur, probably. It's the most likely outcome of what happens when you
Dude,
start.
yes,
It's
that has
just,
actually
this game
happened
is
to me.
just notorious for just, if you go to public worlds and you first start, the game is just like a mess. And it's nothing I'm not used to. We grew up on like Modern Warfare comms early on. Modern Warfare 2,
Yeah.
I remember, is just the most vile stuff comes out. But especially the age too of the average age of people in the public worlds feels very young. So it's like, all right, I don't want to do this anymore. Like the first time I tried VR chat, I logged on. I tried it for like 2 days, and I was like, all right, so I'm never going to use this again. Until I discovered all these Discord groups that actually organize around, all right, there's this community in here that does DJing. There's a community that's like a flight simulator group where they meet up every Wednesday and fly jets in some of the cool worlds, and they'll do like dogfighting. But you just had to organize it through Discord. But now there's a group system where you can create a group, theme it around, then have like admins, mods. You can set up worlds for your group so you don't have to invite anyone. They can just go to the group page and see, oh, Jones and Rick set up a podcast recording. We'll go sit in the live studio because we're in there. We've been given the privileges in the group to come do a live viewing. So now
Oh,
there's like
that's
a
cool.
full group
That's
thing.
cool.
So when you join the game, you can be like, all right, I don't need to go to public worlds. I can just look up, okay, is anyone here into drum and bass? And then you'll immediately find 5 groups. Like every Wednesday we meet up and DJ drum and bass stuff in this world. And it
Wow.
seems like a small update, but like social VR, we're talking about unexpected use cases of some of this tech. Social VR is like
Yeah.
maybe not the most unexpected use case of VR. I'd say probably exercise is a huge use case that people wouldn't have immediately guessed. But social VR, you go on Steam, you go on the app stores. This is like the most played game on Steam VR. And then it's one of the most played games on Steam in general, which is the PC, like pretty much has a monopoly on PC gaming. So it's a good indicator of what people are playing. And so I just see this
Mhm.
as like another stepping stone. I know VR chat still isn't the biggest app in VR. It's like Beat Saber and something else, but like it is the most resilient kind of app style because you can meet up with all these groups and because it
Yeah.
feels realistic. And so now adding this group feature just so solidifies it going forward as like the place to go for community in VR. So I'm stoked on it.
Dude,
I think it's cool.
yeah, that's fascinating. What you just said about coming to the podcast studio, that got me thinking about how creators could potentially use this. A lot of the Web3 thing is all about like, engaging your community as a creator and just like it's all about community. And so that would be fascinating. I don't know the mechanism behind this whole thing, but if someone collected your NFT or whatever, say Rick and Jones as a podcast, we issued NFTs, 10 exclusive NFTs or whatever at some point as like a way to fund the thing. And then those 10 people we're the only ones to get the NFT in order to get into our group that allowed you to come see this live. And you could think about like musicians, like in the studio or whatever. That could be a very interesting way to help creators engage their community. Because this does feel very realistic.
It felt like
Is there any.
essential for social VR just because, again, I feel like most people who play VR chat and don't have someone there to guide them from the get go give up on it. But the people who are in it are like in it. And it's, you just got, it's,
That was exactly what happened to me. I tried it for a little bit and I was in some shooting game and I was like, what is this? This is not fun at all. And then when we like came to that world and we like played Pong and we were just hanging, it was like, oh my gosh, I actually see the value of this now.
yeah,
This is
I didn't
cool.
get it at all when I joined until I think it was like, I forget how I came across it, but I came across somehow there's like these clubs in it and they throw down these like club nights, and I was like, I don't recognize any of the names, but it's cool that they do this. And then there's one of the most popular ones had Lax City DJ at it. And I was like, all right, you know what? I got to go check it out. And then I did that and I was like, this is the most mind blowing experience ever. It seems so lame from the outside too, which is an issue with VR in general, is like you have to try it. But like then you
Yeah.
try it and then you experience something that like just nails it. Like this club, the work they put into, I think it was Loner, which is one of the big VR chat clubs. They put in like they got 3D modelers making the most insane but also like realistic spaces. So like you it feels like somewhere that exists in real life. And then immediately I was like, all right, I got to join the Discord. I got to know when all the events are. I got to meet all these people. But now, the more they build this stuff into the game, the less you have to like use your phone or your PC as like a crutch to get into it. You can just get into it and find the group and
Yeah.
just join them.
Dude, that is so cool. Yeah. The social piece of it is that was like even just this right here. Like this is so cool. Like this is almost like giving me a moment right now too that it's like we're in totally different places and we're just sitting down on a couch
It's
communicating and it's so
so
much
much better
it's
than
different. It feels
Zoom,
different than like Zoom or
phone,
Hangout. Yes.
texting. It's
Yes.
not real life hanging out, but it's the closest digital equivalent to that.
It's almost even hard to compare because this we couldn't get this stuff. There's almost like
Well,
perks to
that's
it.
there's so many things that you it's obviously if you're trying to use this as a replacement for real life, there's probably some issues there. And there are a lot of people in this game that do that. But some of these clubs, they have these effects and lighting situations that aren't possible in real life, and it's just the craziest thing to experience.
Okay, question for you, maybe as a closing thing. I don't really have a good thesis right now for what that actually looks like. And I'm curious if you do. I guess what I mean is, does that mean that we're all just like sitting inside on our headsets all day, every day, and then like we totally forget about the physical? Or do you have any type of thesis of where you feel like this
I
might head?
do. I feel pretty strongly about I think a lot of people are off base. There's some like very grand predictions about what VR is going to be like, and I don't think that's going to pan out. I think VR, the physicality of it is always going to relegate it to something a little bit more niche than like playing Call of Duty on a flat screen. I think augmented reality is way more likely to be something that takes off. And I'm not even convinced that's like guaranteed, but I just think something that isn't isolating, it's not as physical and uncomfortable as VR would be. And the only way to make VR like really take to engage all the senses and replace everything is you need like a treadmill, you need a haptic suit. It's always going to be so expensive. Maybe not. Maybe there's some future where it's not, but I doubt it. So I see people using VR as like a screen replacement. Like I don't need to buy like a PC and download or buy like a $700 monitor that's huge and like go sit down at. I can go sit on the couch and like project a monitor out in front of me, or it'll just replace my environment and I can do like 2D gaming there. And then I can go on the road and have an augmented reality overlay, give me directions places, and I can talk to it and it can give me information about the world.
I think that sounds solid. I genuinely think the most exciting thing here is that no one has any idea. Like to my Uber example, I doubt a single person would have predicted that. And so the best thing we can do is just continuously be on the frontier, continuously talk about it, educate ourselves, and just see where it goes and like, adapt. And so for those listening, if that's something that interests you, follow along as we dive in. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Rick and Jones exploring the digital future, baby. Tune in every week as we debrief on the biggest happenings in VR, Web3, and various other topics related to the digital
Cheers.
future. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.